help with the introduction. Just give me a second. Let me know when you see my screen, please. Okay.
Yes, now we can.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let me start by saying it's an honor to stand on this platform and actually be giving the first presentation. Like I met Taiwo just recently in person, and I did really appreciate the effort that they have done to put together such a conference. I think this is something that we really need to do. It's something that we really have to encourage, because as long as we do not form, like a one body that can have a voice, then it will be difficult, as individuals to really make an impact or to really make a difference both here and back home in our various countries. So good job to the organizers of this conference. Today, I'll be talking about how to survive and strive during your PhD. And I just quickly usually start every slide, whether it's scholarship webinars that I organize frequently, or any form of conversation or presentations that I have to present, I usually start with the question, why? The reason is because as long as we are not clear on the why, it's difficult to understand and find the resilience to go through. For a PhD, it could be many things, right? Do you want a PhD because you want to be called a doctor? Do you want a PhD because you're passionate about that area? And if so, why is that important? Do you want a PhD because it seems like the next thing to do after a master's degree, so that you avoid, at least push into the future, that daunting experience of searching for a job? So you could easily just say that after my master's, I get a PhD, at least I don't have to bother for a job for 3 years. So is that the reason why you want a PhD? Or there could be more. So it's important that you first define the why, because that is the why would form the strength that would wake you every morning to go back to the research that has not been giving you your expected outcome for months or even years. So the why has to be so big, bigger than your fear of failing. Because if the why is not strong enough, then getting disappointed along the way becomes very, very easy. Okay, so whatever the why might be, I'm not saying that somebody that has a why to want to be called a doctor makes it less important than somebody that has a why for a stronger passion or motivation. It all depends on how much you allocate to that your why. So as long as the why is strong enough, that is what you would help you to go through the whole the whole stress that would come through a PhD journey. I just quickly put up this slide just to give a bit about myself as an introduction. So I'm Nigerian, like most of us, I think. I did my first degree in photo in chemistry, then finished in 2011. Served in 2012 in Rivers State, and then came to Germany or came to Europe through the Erasmus Mundus program. So I started my scholarship journey actually from my 4th year. So I got a scholarship in my 3rd trial. Sent a lot of emails to professors. I think many of us have this experience, so I wouldn't even talk a lot about it. So after I moved on from my master's, which I did between Germany and France, I went into the Erasmus Mundus, the Marie Curie PhD program, which is between Germany and France. I will talk a bit about that. So that's just the brief introduction about me. And as Dr. Taiwo said, currently since for the past 2 years now, I've been a research scientist working for Procter & Gamble in Germany. So the title says, how do you strive, right, and survive during your PhD journey? So the first thing is to strive. And I always remember one of my very first experience of really being in contact with PhD candidates or PhD students. This was when I was doing my master's thesis in Bordeaux in France. And one thing that I usually remember them for was how stressed they look. They wouldn't smile. They would just go from one lab to another. Most times they are so tensed, most especially those that are in their third year of their PhD. So the question that you never ask anyone, right, is when are you going to be done with your PhD? It's like a no, don't ask anybody that. Don't ask a PhD student, when are you going to be done, right? Or when are you going to submit your thesis? You don't do it. So I learned that in many ways. And of course, I remember that a lot. So it just also shows that there is a lot that goes through the PhD process, right? It's not an exam. One of the advice I got from my supervisor then was that a PhD is not for someone, that people that succeed through their PhD are not the most intelligent, that those that are smart, right? And those that can deal with what they don't expect. As brilliant students, we have always had the 1.0 or the A's in our exams. This is not an exam that you pass per se, right? So you start an experiment or you start a setup, you don't know the outcome. You try to understand what the outcome might be, but that uncertainty that comes with things you might not necessarily control challenges us and pushes us out of our comfort zone clearly, because you cannot say, I've read enough, so I'm going to pass. No, you go into a real experiment without a clarity on what could be the outcome. So ability to, put all of those together and still keep moving on, which is why I started the first slide by talking about you working on your why. Of course, so before you strive, you have to survive. And I have this video that I made 5 months exactly after I started my PhD. It was a very, very difficult moment. And it also helped me to understand what I've been told even before I started. Because we might have some impression that a PhD is an extension of a master's thesis. It's not. So if you should make a master thesis that you should complete in 6 months, 3 years, it doesn't make it a PhD. Okay, as long as it is designed as a master thesis, it doesn't translate into a PhD simply by duration. So a PhD is not an extension of a master thesis. Okay, so I learned this in a very difficult way, and I would explain after this video. Yeah, it should be about 2 minutes. I have to go out from. Let me know when you see. I think I would have to share this separately. I will stop sharing and then I can play the video. 1 second. Let me know when you can see and hear.
Hello. Today is the 16th of
Yes,
June
we can see.
2016. This
And
is
can
the
you
5
hear?
months of my PhD.
We can hear, but not too loud. I don't know
That
if.
may be
Okay, but
I
I think it's
think it
better.
was my voice.
of
Yeah.
my PhD work
Okay.
every month. But obviously, this not happened up to now. And after 5 months, what have I achieved? Okay, and what is the next step I have to take? 5 months, maybe not such a long time, but a lot has happened so far. And just today I've got to know that maybe most of the experiments I've done will not make a lot of difference if I had known earlier that my modification is not occurring on the cellulose. So I'm having probably a side reaction, and this is very prominent. I'm also happy that this is discovered earlier enough such that I had not wasted a lot of time um, on false hope. And so maybe when it's too good, maybe it's not. When it's too good to be true, then it's not true. I'm hoping that in the next few weeks, I'm going to rectify this and improve on the modification of cellulose through multi-component reactions. It's my expectation that in the next few weeks, maybe 2 weeks by max, I should have understood the position of my work and I would have been able to know what to do next. Till next month, I hope that I'll be able to update you and let you know how much I've done and what are my expectations. So, but now I think my strongest motivation is the fact that I'm doing what I really want to do. I want to work on sustainable chemistry, and I'm working on a topic that I think I'm the right person to work on it. Um, I also think that I'm in the right group and I'm getting the right support that I need. So, yeah, I think that in the next 2 weeks, I should be able to update you and let you know how much I've done and what next is to be done. Till we meet next month, have a nice time. This is Casey. Peace.
Okay, so like I said, it was a very, very difficult time. You could see I struggled to speak. And I put it in two ways, that there are two ways that your research could go. Maybe three, but I talk about two. The first is that you are doing something that is not working, at least you know it's not working, and you are aware, okay? So you are aware it is not working, you are making effort to improve it. Now, the second, which is more dangerous, is that you are doing something that is not working, but you don't know, okay? You don't know that it's not working. So means you are not trying to solve the problem because you don't think there is any. You are focused on improving, you are focused on completing your thesis, only to realize at the end that it was not working. I think that's the most dangerous. And that is even what made my case very, very difficult to deal with. So what happened was that, in fact, when I started my research in the first week, I jumped straight in because I felt I was already starting late versus every other person that was doing the PhD that I was in. So the first day, the second day, I was already in the lab doing experiments. And after 1 week, I was getting results and everybody was like, really, so fast? And I said, yes, it's working. And I continued the next month up to the 5th month, trying to optimize on the process I was working on. In fact, with my supervisor, we're already talking about, putting it together to have our first publication. And people were just amazed at the speed at which I was doing my work. So only for me to realize one day that it's not what it is, right? And it was a very, very big shock, both to me and also to my supervisor, because the PhD itself had been designed around what I have been doing. So the people that, the first person that worked on one aspect of my thesis did something in her master's work that formed the foundation of my thesis. So when I had that problem, that I felt, okay, this modification is not happening on cellulose, this is a side reaction, I went straight to her and said, could you check the washing process you've done on your product? Because I've been applying what she told me, right? And that's another important tip I will talk about later. Find your own path because it's your PhD. So she tried the washing process and she had the same problem. So means what she thought she had actually succeeded to do in her master thesis was not correct, right? So of course, we could look at it from both ways, that if it was not really correct, maybe I would have not had a PhD position, right? So it was in that on clarity of what they were actually getting that I actually got a PhD position. And now in my PhD position, applying what they thought they have established led me to a point where I realized that it was not what it is. So I went to my supervisor, and I'm going to talk about that also later. And I told him that I don't know what to do. It was 5 months of me thinking I'm making progress, but it was all nothing. And I remember what he said. It was like, a failed reaction is not a failed life. We are very fortunate that we noticed it on time. And what bothered me a lot was, what if this happened in my second or third year? Where should I start from, right? So take note, don't be afraid of what could happen. Make sure that you do not stay in your fear of discovering what could be wrong, and you just keep postponing it because you don't want to be hit by that reality, it's better for you to get to that reality as soon as possible, okay? No matter how uncomfortable it might be. Okay, so I go back to my presentation. So that was a tough one, but it also formed the whole foundation of how my research work completely changed. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, but what happened after that was that it completely changed because I came into the research work with an approach that had been established, right? But when this happened, I had to step back and start doing the real research work myself. Like I started going into the literature works. I started trying to understand what else could I be able to do. And eventually, even though it felt like I had lost 5 months, in fact, I felt that that 5 months was the most important of my PhD, because it was after that 5 months that I went on to really understand that I'm responsible for my PhD and not somebody else. So eventually I finished the thesis within record time of 3 years, had all my publications already published, except one that was published this last year. I had everything published before my defense, a lot of conferences attended, a lot of awards, finalists in different competitions, but it all started by me realizing that this is me and my thesis. It is between us, and there is nobody should know, nobody knows it better because nobody had gone through that path that I'm taking. So that is something we should also realize, that it is your baby and you have to nurture that baby and own it, okay? So one thing I could say a PhD actually is, in my opinion, is a relationship, right? It's a relationship between you, your thesis, and your supervisor. And in this relationship, communication is very, very key. I mean, they talk about this, communication is important in every relationship. This is not different. Communication is so important that as long as you are scared of telling your supervisor that something is not working, then there is a problem. Something is not working is not necessarily bad, right? Something is not working is also an opportunity for you to identify why is this not working, because it's a thesis. So your thesis could as well come out to be ways that this does not work, because that is actually something that people can build up and avoid, right? Or, you know, use other approaches because you have established the processes that doesn't work. So communication with your supervisor helps to allow you discuss things early on. Don't let things accumulate. Don't have a relationship that you feel your supervisor needs to ask you the progress of your thesis before you bring it up. Make sure that, let's say frequently, or at least, or yeah, once every month, you have a summary of what you have done, the next steps, next things that you want to do in the next month, and where you think you are in your PhD. And that establishment and communication with your supervisor on what your PhD should actually look like. What does success looks like? Because in reality, you don't really finish a PhD, to be sincere, right? You finish up to a point where your supervisor feels, okay, this is sufficient to get a PhD. There are many things that you could still do at that point. And typically at the end of your third year, you realize that there are so many opportunities, options that you would have wanted to explore. So make sure you define what success would look like with your PhD, with your supervisor during that process of your work, okay? So you are the center of it all. Like, you are in charge of managing this relationship, your thesis, your supervisor, and yourself. Of course, if we look at what a PhD journey could look like, this is what we might think, right? For me, I started, and after a few weeks, I was already getting a lot of positive results. And I thought, oh, wow, people told me that PhD is tough. They didn't know who I was. So this is me just going to move through this very smooth pathway all the way to my graduation. In reality, it might look something like this, right? And even if you were to draw a straight line through this wavy curve, you would still see that yeah, you drop, but you don't drop to the base, right? Which is something that you need to always like appreciate the journey more than the result. Like appreciate what you know today that you didn't know yesterday, rather than getting angry that why are you knowing it today? Why not yesterday? So being able to condition your mind to appreciate the process over the result would help you to keep on, because you know that the things that you are learning is what would add up to that overall end that you are looking for. Okay, so in reality, you have something like, it could even be worse, but just know that it is never definitely a smooth curve. So now that we have looked at how to survive, because it's important for us to build that tenacity and resilience to be able to go through the PhD program. So literature review cannot be overemphasized. Make sure that this is something that you take from the beginning. Literature review, and when you review, you can even start putting it in a way as you want to write a literature review, right? So you will need this for your chapter 2, but as you are checking publications in your field, you can already start building up your own literature review, which will definitely help you when you start writing your thesis. Design of experiment, this is important. Understand what you want to do each day, right? And how it adds up into the overall picture that you are looking for, okay? Have an end in sight. This means that don't just do an experiment for the sake of it. Understand what it's going to add up to, so that even when you start thinking about writing a publication, you would be aware of how this type of results are going to be, how these results are going to come together, okay? Then think publication from day one. So publication from day one doesn't mean you should publish from day one. It means that before even your experiments, when you are doing your literature review, you get familiar with the language, the extent of research work that is done, the methods that they normally use in your field, what type of results are they reporting, so that when you are doing your own experiments, you can also use that as a guide in how you design your experiments. You can also use that as a guide in how you try to develop your own results, okay? And it's even better for you to have your work in a publication format, because again, when you start writing your thesis, it becomes very, very helpful. I completed my thesis in 2 weeks, but this was only possible because all the works that I've done were already either published or already submitted, right? So it was easier for me to say, okay, all my data have already been, discussed. They have already been put in the same format, in the same design, or even when I was still doing my experiments. So I didn't have to like start reworking all my graphs, because I was doing that almost after every, not after every experiment, but in the context of the particular research work that I was doing. Communication, I said we cannot overemphasize the importance of this. Attend conferences as much as you can, because this is also where you can identify collaborations and networking that you need even after your PhD work. Networking also very important. You want to complete your PhD, but you also want to be able to move ahead. And this will not be something that you really build up just based on your own research group. So identify people that are doing something that you could work with, different countries, professors in different labs, that you are doing something that you find a way that you can collaborate with them. So when you network and collaborate, you go through the whole PhD experience and you come out with a bigger network that can either help you in your jobs, can either help you in placing you in opportunities that you would have otherwise not been familiar with or aware of. So in summary of all of this, I want to end with that you should remember that less is more. Less is more here focuses on what you should do to bring the most impact. So when I did my first poster presentation, I wanted all the results to be on it. I wanted everybody to see how amazing I was, how much work I've been doing. And when my supervisor looked at it, he said, nobody would look at this poster. It's too crowded. There's just too much on it. So it's important for us to learn simplification as we go through the PhD program. Understand, how can I explain what I'm doing to somebody that is not in my field? Right? As long as you get to that point where you can explain what you are doing to people that are not in your field, that is how much you have become the expert of what you are doing. Because as they said, simplification is what the most advanced form it's like the most advanced form of complexity, because the more you can simplify something means you understood all the different complexities and you found a way to make it simple. Okay. Of course, as you go through the PhD program, you could hear all types of stories, but remember one thing, that, as I said, when you have a definition of your why, whatever you think, whether you can or you can't, you are right. And of course, as long as you think you can, it's always just a matter of time. But each of that time, you have to focus to make the best out of it. So I always say that the question is not about the outcome, but really the process that leads to that outcome. And of course, when you go through such, an uncertainty, which is what a PhD is at the end of the day, don't be shy away from failures, because these are, at the end of the day, the essential ingredients for success. Thank you very much. And we can always keep in touch. You have here my LinkedIn handle. I hope I did not take too much of your time.
Submit to the other one.
Thank you.
Individually, but when I started doing, when we discussed that, so I submitted my work to both at the same time, and the other one will read and copy me and send to her. So it was one of the ways we managed that situation. So she found out that I am not the only one who knows that this is the date the work was submitted to her. So that is one of the ways I was able to manage, and I was able to finish within 3 years. That's the first one. So another thing that you mentioned, the issue of publication. I think social scientists, it depends on what, I don't know what they do here in Germany, whether it's PhD by publication or PhD by monograph. In our field in social sciences, I think in also management sciences, you do PhD by either publication or by monograph. I did by monograph, but whichever path you follow, I think the best is to try and publish when you are doing your PhD. Whether you're doing a PhD by monograph, it's good you publish. And also, it's something I have discovered that we suffer a lot. I don't know whether it's applicable to people in sciences, core sciences. In social sciences, we Africans are seriously marginalized in terms of you submit papers and good papers and they are rejected. But one of the things that has helped me is this starting early to play the politics of publication. It's not that you write something very good in social sciences that will make you publish it in good journals. I started very early involving, once I publish a work, they send me a work from that journal, I abandoned every other thing and review for them. So I began to build relationship during my PhD, and it has helped me a lot. I will use just maybe this and I will hand over. There's a work that recently I had the journal that I published, I think my first work during my PhD, and I published a long number of works and I reviewed for them constantly. Then I had a recent experience where a reviewer insisted that the paper should be rejected. And the editor wrote me that because of my relationship with them, that he can't reject the work. I should do something else, which I did, and it was accepted. If not for the long-standing relationship I built with them, I think it would have been editors of the top journal would contact you to ask you to seek your opinion when they have multiple things to do. So start very early to do work, submit, and involve in the politics. It will help you to climb. Most Africans, I don't see Africans in sitting as editorial board of good, our journals, top journals. So it makes our work very difficult to go in. So that is now, and the last I would say is that whenever you are lost in the PhD process, in the journey, don't think you are the only one. It happens to everybody. Whenever, because it happened to me early, and I was like, oh, I thought I was very good until I went for a seminar, and the dean of the faculty said that he was lost during his PhD. That was a relief. Or I said, oh, if the dean of the faculty now was lost then, that means who am I? So it helps me a lot. Don't think it's happening to you. You must be lost. In fact, PhD is like uncharted territory, that one way or the other, you find your map and you find your course and get to the final destination. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you for those tips. Very helpful, and I like the way that you try to capture it, especially to give a broad spectrum that my experience might not necessarily cover. simply because of the field. So that was good. Thank you.
I was struggling to unmute myself because it says you have to unmute me. Anyway, thank you so much for allowing me to speak in this session. I am Lydia Radoli. I'm a lecturer at Dace University in Nairobi. I studied in Germany. I did my PhD in Germany, and like Dr. Shimas, I'm in social sciences as the last speaker. Mostly I had my focus on development sociology, where I looked at media migration and development as the core facets of my study. I have a background in media profession. However, I really enjoyed the presentation of Dr. Chimas, and it just reminds me of the course I teach here for PhD class, that's called 831, just an appreciation of the journey of a PhD. And I cannot say enough or emphasize the need, especially for African scholars who are going abroad, Germany and other countries to do their studies. The need to find your path, because sometimes you're immersed in projects that are designed by your supervisors, by your universities, in the chairs where you do your PhD, and that really leaves out your contextual evaluation of your local context, especially African research. And there is a gap when it comes to the position of African researchers on the global perspective. So I just wanted to add my voice and say there is a lot of value in maintaining your own authenticity as a researcher, also realizing the context. When you do, for example, in Germany, how is it relevant? Like myself, come back to work in research and in academia in African institutions, but we are yet to fill that gap, because you go for a conference, you had a recent conference, International Communication Conference, and you can count the number of African scholars in this conference. But my last point is that, again, when you're starting out your PhD, you want to ask, what is it in the PhD that you're seeking for? And in my defenses, when I examine PhD students, I'm asking them, PhD in the PhD, because you can't just go do papers without really having a significant impact on the area of academia, research, and the state of art. So I'm really encouraged by this group, and I hope that we are going to exchange more as we break out and other sessions that we are going to engage. Thank you so much, doctors, for your presentations.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for the additions. I think very, very helpful. Identifying your own part and understanding that it is your PhD. That is why there is a you are there. It's not your PhD. It's not the PhD of your supervisor. It's yours. So there's also the need for you to be able to defend really why you think what you have done is what you have done, versus accepting every correction that comes with what your supervisor thinks. So very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lydia Radoli from Kenya. I hope you're still staying with us. Now, last question before we go to the next presentation. We're just running out of time now. Okikiola Olajide, please, you have the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You, Dr. Kelechukwu, for your talk. It was really interesting. So I don't have a question. I just wanted to add something to your talk. So I am a life scientist, a biologist to be specific, and we work on cell culture. So we work on organisms, or we do animal experiments. And I felt the need to speak towards the time of completion of PhD, because you finished in 3 years, which is very good. And the second speaker, the second commenter, also talked about completion in 3 years. And this is not always possible in life science, because you cannot control how your cells are growing. You cannot control the reproduction of your animals. And also people in plant biology, you cannot control the reproduction or of your organism. So these are things that you cannot control. So I don't want people to feel the pressure that the standard is to finish in 3 years. This is not the case. It's excellent if you can do so, but please do not feel put down or discouraged or feel like a failure if you cannot finish in 3 years, because in most cases, this is actually not very possible. So I just wanted to put this out there so that people in life sciences are not discouraged or always want to finish in 3 years. And I think one other thing is to try to enjoy the PhD process. Honestly, try to relate with your colleagues, try to relate with the professors in your institute, go for coffee, take the vacation, really enjoy the process. Because one thing I have noticed that the attitude of, let me say, Germans here towards us is we are too like, go, 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 go. And this is because of our background, this is because of the way of life where we are coming from. We don't live in a bubble. We have to struggle for literally everything. But when you come into this environment, it's a completely different system. And sometimes I think they find us overwhelming. So I just want to tell you to also enjoy the process. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I would want to comment on that. I think what you said is spot on. It's very important for us. That's why I also talked about the you are there in the PhD. So whether your PhD is completed in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it doesn't matter. In my opinion, what matters is what your PhD becomes. Like, what did you do? Okay. At the end of the day, you want to be proud of the work that you did, the contributions that you made in your field. So I know that some people get the stress there comes most times from the funding, right? So if you have a 3 years funding, of course, whether it is within your possibility or not, the funding stops in 3 years, which was the case that I had. And I still had people in the kind of PhD that I did that completed. The last person actually graduated this year. So she completed in 5 years. But in those 2 years, she needed to find how to fund herself, right? Because the money would not still be forthcoming. So I agree with you 100% that we should go through the process. It's your process, but just make sure, like you said, that you enjoy the process. Don't feel the pressure that you must, publish 10 papers for like the person in your group. That's the competition that is not healthy. Focus more on what you are bringing to yourself, that your uniqueness that you are bringing into your PhD. And thank you very much. But that was really spot on. I just also wanted to clarify that 3 years is not, to me, like an achievement. I think it was more like trying.
It is an achievement. Don't downplay it.
No. I didn't want to get to the point that I would not be paid for the PhD. So I think that was avoiding that scenario was more important. And I could finish in 2.5 years, and there was no point to do it. So let's enjoy the process, like you said. Our background, of course, puts us in the situation where we have to know, do more before we feel we are making a contribution. So let's also try to realize that we are like every other person. Thank you for those very wonderful comments.